Hmm. In this video, I'm going to be going over what is the difference between BIOS and UEIF. UEF and BIOS are two types of motherboard firmware used during startup to initialize the hardware and load the operating system. They determined the device boot priority and allows users to customize hardware and software settings. Both firmware types serve the same purpose. What is BIOS? BIOS stands for Basic Input Output System. It is a small piece of code on the read-only flash memory chip of the motherboard's EPROM, erasable programmer read-only memory, erasable programmable read-only memory. The chip is non-volatile, meaning that it retains its contents after the power is turned off. What is UEIF? UEIF is short for United Extensible Firmware Interface. Its purpose is to store all data about device initialization and startup in a .uefi file, which is kept on a special disk partition called the EFI system partition, ESP. The ESP holds the bootloader responsible for booting the operating system. Release dates. Boot BIOS. BIOS was released in 1975. UEFI was released in 2002. So here's the question: why was UEFI made if BIOS worked fine for 27 years? The primary purpose of creating UEFI was to overcome the limitations of BIOS and shorten system boot times. UEIF uses the GPT partitioning scheme and supports much greater drive sizes. In addition, UEFI provides better security with the secure boot feature, preventing unauthorized apps from booting. However, the downside is that secure boot prevents dual booting because it treats other OSs as unassigned apps. BIOS pros: not many. BIOS cons: slower boot time, cannot provide a graphical user interface, can only have a partition table for partitions, can only have a bootable drive of up to 2.2 terabytes, does not have secure boot, does not support networking, and the boot environment can easily become corrupted. UEFI pros: faster boot times, can provide graphical user interface, has secure boot, can have a partition table of 128 partitions, can have a bootable drive of up to 9 zettabytes, supports networking, and performs SILIC redundancy checks to identify any corruption issue. Thus, it creates a more robust boot environment that can be easily recovered. UEFI cons: dual booting can be harder with secure boot on. Dual booting is not impossible. It's just harder with UEI with secure boot, right? It's fine and normal with UEIF. It's just a little bit harder with secure boot. It's not impossible to do. And there you go. That is the differences between BIOS and UEIF.